Hi, Chanel. Thank you so much for speaking to UBTV today.
So my name's Chanel Smith and I'm 22 and I'm a fifth year medical student at the University of Bristol.
What would you say that the impact of COVID has been on the structure of your medical curriculum?
I think the main change that I've seen personally is the transition that we've had from a face-to-face teaching. Medicine is such an interactive specialty. It relies on that patient-doctor interaction and relationship. And to not be able to have that is really difficult.
And so you've been also working on wards in Southmead. Can you tell me about your placement working on a general surgery ward? What's the day-to-day of your job life? And are these typical tasks for a fifth year medical student?
So as a medical student, you try to do as much as you possibly can. And ultimately, I'm not a qualified doctor yet. So there's a lot of things I can't do. But I try and support the frontline staff in whatever I can. And some of the things that involves is taking bloods, writing discharge summaries. And I've been volunteering to help out with the vaccination clinics. So I've already had my first jab.
And there have been some COVID outbreaks on the ward that you were working on in Southmead. How does your role change when this happens?
Yeah, so it's so difficult because obviously there's a careful balance to strike. I'm really there to learn and gain experience. And when you have COVID patients, it makes it quite difficult to do that because I have to balance the risk of interacting with patients with actually putting my own safety at risk and actually putting other staff at risk and other people at risk. And as a result, if there are COVID patients on the ward, I've actually often been asked to wait outside while the doctor sees them because it requires a lot of equipment to ensure their safety. And in that way, I feel like I've not had too much one-to-one interaction with COVID patients.
That's really interesting to hear because I was going to ask you if you felt scared when you first realised you'd be working in proximity to COVID.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting concept. I have to admit, I mean, touch wood, I've not actually caught COVID yet, which is quite surprising because I know a lot of my medical student friends definitely have. Yes, you're definitely right in the sense that despite the adversity of everything that we're experiencing, I guess it has actually made me feel more positive, and I've tried to remain positive out of everything that's going on.
So lots of NHS and frontline workers, as you know, are suffering in huge numbers from mental health issues. How have you yourself, or perhaps your friends who are also medical students, been coping?
I mean, it's challenging, of course. We're in unprecedented territory. And I think especially at the start of the first lockdown, when there was so much uncertainty and anxiety about what was going to happen, I think that was probably the pinnacle of all these problems started.
And with regards to seeing other people, how strict have you had to be? Because I know that some medical students are having to live where they're doing their placement because of risks of potentially infecting their flatmates or family. How have you managed this?
Yes, so as a medical student and someone that's going into the NHS, I want to set a good example and I want to follow the guidelines because it would be so hypocritical of me to not do so. And so that's very important. It's been difficult, but I'm currently living in Gloucester and I live in the hospital accommodation.
I imagine there's always a sense of solidarity and like camaraderie in hospital accommodation, but do you think it's increased given the current situation?
Yes, I think it's definitely increased for sure. I mean, I've been someone that's actually lived on my own for 3 years now, even before COVID. So I think for me, it was less of a transition perhaps, but I know that I've definitely spoken to colleagues who are struggling and actually want to go back to live in Bristol because, being on the hospital side every day, all day is a lot.
Lots of medical students, I don't know how you are yourself, but are known for having a work hard, play hard attitude. Whether that's the case or you just really value your time off, do you think that the profession is made harder without the sort of letting go aspect?
So, I mean, I would say it is harder. I guess because you're doing so much of your learning online, it's hard to ever feel like you've done enough, because there's so many resources, there's always something else you can know. I think with medicine in general, you never ever stop learning. The guidelines always change, and I think even despite COVID, it always feels like it's never ending. It's difficult.
And so, on that note, you do feel that the university and the government have been supporting you adequately as a medical student during these times, or do you feel there's anything additional that they could be doing?
Yeah, I mean, the university in particular, I would have to say they've been very, very supportive for me as a medical student. I know for medical students across the country, everyone's going to be in a different situation. For me, I do feel supported, and I feel grateful that they have been. They've given me a lot of resources, and often checking in on us and providing services if we ever need to talk, and always ensuring there's someone to talk to if we need to. I think for the government, I mean, it's difficult to say, because they're obviously trying to stop the spread of the virus, and as a result, that's kind of meant to isolated the students, and students have been quite frustrated as a result, and I've felt that at the best of times, and therefore it can feel like they're almost working against you.
And the student community is often singled out as a section of society which hasn't been respecting government guidance. How do you feel about this as a medical student? Because obviously you have to respect guidance. You don't view it as a matter of choice like certain students do.
From what I've seen, I do feel like everyone is actually trying their best to follow the guidelines. And I would argue it's not even students, but anyone who wasn't failing to follow the guidelines would be at fault. And, you know, just social distancing, washing your hands, it's such a simple measure to implement. And therefore, it's even more remarkable that some people are still unable, it seems, to follow quite simple instructions.
And you mentioned that you've been working on vaccinations. Going back to the student community again, how do you feel about other members of the student community who are against vaccination, as this might actually affect whether we can all go back to lectures come September or later?
I think with the vaccine, you know, this is basically our solution. This is our hope to return to normality. And for vaccinations to work, everyone has to have the vaccine in order to create that herd immunity.
So during lockdown, you embraced your creative side and started a YouTube channel singing. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yes, I did. So I have always had this passion for singing and songwriting, and as a medic, we're quite all-rounded people, but we kind of have this other life that people don't know about, and I guess mine was this. I found myself with all this free time, and even though I wasn't working in the hospital, I felt that I just wanted to do something to try to help the NHS and support in any way that I could. And I did that through music. So what I did was basically write songs. One of them was called Inside, and it was about encouraging people to stay inside, and it had a bit of humour. Gotta stay away if you got the flu, got a temperature, cough or sneeze. But there was a really important underlying message there.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Chanel. Thank you.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.